Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. I am your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very accomplished and multifaceted woman from the UK, Leslee Udwin. Leslee, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh. It's a great pleasure to be here speaking with you.
Thank you. Leslee is a human rights advocate and an education activist. She was voted the second most impactful woman in 2015 after Hillary Clinton. She's a former filmmaker and now a campaigner for a systemic change in education. She's a maker of films like Who Bombed Birmingham, East is East, and India's Daughter. And these films have been awarded globally. And of course, she's been awarded, recognized, and felicitated several times. So Leslee, let's first start with your journey in filmmaking, and then we'll come to education and human rights. What made you select filmmaking as a career?
Well, in fact, I first selected the career of acting.
Okay.
And that's what I did for the first 15 years or so of my adult life.
Mm-hmm.
And then something extraordinary happened in my own life when a psychopath landlord, criminal psychopath landlord, took over the house that I was living in. And I found myself in pitched battle for 2.5 years against this man, Nicholas van Hoogstraten, who basically wanted to terrify the tenants out so that he could turn a massive profit by selling our building vacant, as opposed to with those protected rent act tenants that he bought the building with. At the end of a very life and death battle, it was very dangerous, I must tell you, because he'd been in prison for throwing a hand grenade through a tenant's front window. This was no lamb we were dealing with. And at the end of the 2.5-year battle, I studied housing law. I was determined that this man would not get away with it. And we took the case to the High Court and won and set a legal precedent and managed to get him out. It's a very long story and we don't have that much time, so I'm not going to tell you all the details, but suffice it to say that at the end of that battle, I decided to become a producer of films.
Wow.
Why? Because as an actor, I was the vehicle through which stories of others were being told. As a producer, I could choose the subject matter and be the guardian of that vision and communicate things I believed were to be of importance to humankind. And that was when I changed careers and started filmmaking as a producer. And then my last film that I made and shall ever make, India's Daughter, I became a director because I was making that film out of an urgency and with no budget. I was paying for it out of my own pocket and I couldn't afford to hire a director.
Okay.
So I directed it myself.
Okay. Fascinating. And, in this journey as a filmmaker, producer, or a director, do you have any interesting anecdotes that you'd like to share with our viewers and listeners?
Gosh, I mean, there have been so many. I think, when I think about what defines the work I've done as a producer and director, the first thing that comes to mind is threat. I mean, my life was threatened by this thug, Nicholas van Hoogstraten, when he understood that I was the one who got the building off him and took this to court and, forced him to come in front of judges. My life was threatened by the British police when the CID, I mean, whatever they were called, a guy turns up at my home in the early hours of the morning to threaten me that if I continued making this film called Who Bombed Birmingham, which was about a very infamous British miscarriage of justice, that, that would be the end of my career, etc. I mean, literally just direct, awful threats. I was threatened with silence when my film India's Daughter was banned, still is banned. So I suppose all of the anecdotes I have, none of them are really particularly pleasant. I mean, yes, of course, there is a whole substrata of them, but, you asked me to think of anecdotes and stories. And the first thing that crowds my mind is all of those awful negative, dangers of the work that I've done, which is just so grossly unfair, really. At the end of the day, I'm just a very simple lover of human beings, trying always to improve our lot as human beings and our relationships as human beings on this earth. And God knows there is much work to do.
Absolutely. And you said it well. I mean, telling a story is everyone's right. And it certainly doesn't mean that you need to be threatened with your life or any kind of physical harm.
That's right.
Thank you. But I'd like to also talk to you for maybe a couple of minutes on India's Daughter, given the fact that I'm from India. Tell me a little bit about this film and what got it banned.
I think what got it banned was that understandable reaction, that knee-jerk reaction that anyone would feel from whichever part of the world when confronted with their own shame.
I understand.
We all, every country in the world has things to be ashamed of. I've made a film called Who Bombed Birmingham about Britain's shame in a miscarriage of justice. Now, they didn't ban the film, although they did try to threaten me to stop making it. And Margaret Thatcher, the then Prime Minister, when the film was shown, did stand up in Parliament, absolutely furious with me in this film, saying, we will not have trial by television in this country. But we did have trial by television, and those men were released as after 17 years of wrongful imprisonment as a result of that film, bringing the shame of the miscarriage of justice and the British judiciary and the West Midlands police force who had forged confessions and beaten them out of these men. In my work, I'm not partisan. I don't say, well, we're okay, but them over there. I will call out what must be called out wherever it is. I happen to be Jewish by birth, by not faith, because I am not a person of faith. My faith is in humanity and improving the lot of human beings. But, I tell stories that show the innate discrimination within the Jewish religion. And then people from my faith will turn on me and say, why do you say this publicly? And I say, because if we can't criticize ourselves, there is no hope.
Absolutely.
And every country in the world has massive improvement to make as far as our treatment of our fellow human beings is concerned. So why was the film banned? Because that sense of one shame, we don't want the world to see us like this. Now, how ironic when the very thing that took me to India to make that film was the courage, beauty, and extraordinary passion and commitment of the protesters who were out on the streets saying, we won't have any more of this. Correct. It was that high standard of those protesters that drew me to tell this story in the first place. Okay. Apart from that, there was also that sense of territorial reflexive defensiveness that said, you, Gori, have no right coming in here talking about our business. You have nothing to do. You're not of us. You can't come in here with your so-called white skin telling us that this is a problem. We have been working at it for many, many years. Whatever that impulse is that closes human beings down, that is what was responsible. Because actually within this, Ashutosh, the most shocking thing of all, and I don't think we have time to really go into this, but let me tell you that the people who first called for this ban were the feminists, so-called feminists of India, not the government. It was those who we all look up to or looked up to and respected, who said, we don't want this competition with the events we have on March the 8th, International Women's Day. Shut it down. At the end of the day, it was as petty and horrific as that.
Wow. Well, I hope, for all the viewers and listeners who will be listening to our conversation, go and check out India's Daughter on Google and then make a call on what we want to do next, or what you want to do next. But Leslie, now let's keep moving forward. You're also very active, or you're an activist in education. Yes. So let me start by asking you, what ails education today that you believe you want to be fighting about?
We're missing a subject. We're missing a dimension. We are still stuck in a model that was designed in and for the Industrial Revolution and has not really been changed since. What we need to understand is that education is not purely about the job market. Correct. And actually, even if it were about joining the labor market, we're well out of date. We live in a world now where we have calculators. Teaching numeracy to children is not nearly as important as it was. And yet we persist in teaching them numeracy, literacy. Who is teaching our children to be decent human beings who have a moral compass, who have values, human beings who are capable of empathy? Who's teaching them gender equality? We're not. And that's the problem. Why do we have a world that is strangled by rape and sexual harassment and child marriage and domestic abuse? And why do we have that world? Because nowhere are we teaching our children to respect and value one another, regardless of religion or race. Or why do we have this endemic racism rife in the world, all over the world, because we are failing our children. Correct. We are not teaching them, we are not doing our duty of care by our children. And that is what I learned in the prison cells of Tihar jail when I interviewed the rapists and murderers of Jyoti Singh Nirbhaya, the girl on the bus who was gang raped and murdered. That is what I learned there. I also learned that their lawyers, who had had the highest degree of access to education, were as, if not more, misogynistic than the rapists themselves were. And that is because the education system we have is not fit for purpose. So that experience of, conducting those interviews for the film India's Daughter, the second that film was delivered and out, I turned my attention to tackling the root cause of the discriminatory mindset, which is the actual disease, which led those rapists to do what they did. And I believe we cannot simply distance ourselves when these boys and men step out of line and say, oh, nothing to do with us. They are everything to do with us. We, societies around the world, patriarchal culture, sociocultural thinking, we have taught them how to think. Correct. And in teaching them how to think, we have taught them how to act. We dare not say it's nothing to do with us. What we need to do is teach our children at the earliest possible age, when the foundation of their brains is still being built. We have to co-create pro-social neuropathways in their brains. And that is why I've stopped making films, which can only create awareness. And I've turned my attention to tackling the root cause and preventing this horrific violence right across the world, right across all divisive categories of race, religion, gender, etc.
So tell me a little more about what are you doing to tackle the root cause?
I brought together a group of 22 world experts because I was none. And these were experts, are experts, 21 of them. Sadly, Sir Ken Robinson, who was our founding patron, died last year. We still have 21 of these amazing experts in psychology, neuroscience, education, and human rights. And basically, they gave of their best practice. So we've incorporated some of their tools, their practical, tangible, pragmatic tools. We are not so much interested in theory, although we do have curriculum frameworks and pedagogies coming out of our ears. I don't place a great deal of store by those. They are there for the academics who are interested in how we came to design the program in the way we did. What matters to me is those books we've created, 24 per level in 3 age-appropriate levels. Those lesson plans that the teachers have as templates, week by week, 3 lessons a week, practicing, rehearsing, repeating these competencies and skills, 25 of them that we impart over the course of this year of this new subject. The subject we call social emotional learning for social justice. That is what this subject is. We teach children from the age of 3 to 6 because that is when the brain is being built.
Correct. And when you say you teach people, and these 21 people have come together and written a lot of books, are you saying that is the message respect for one another? Is the message love for one another? Or is there any other kind of a message?
The message is all about coexisting in peace, in harmony, valuing each and every person, but it's based on 25 competencies and skills. So they are, for example, empathy, inclusion, celebrating diversity, collaboration, emotional literacy, emotion self-regulation, peaceful conflict resolution, critical thinking, problem solving. There are 25. Gender equality. We teach gender equality to the 3-year-olds so they understand there is no such thing as growing up and saying, you're a girl, you can't go out at night. You're a girl, you're of less value than me. I must get a full glass of milk. You only get a half a glass. You wait until I've finished eating before you eat. All of these divisive, socio-cultural, discriminatory practices is what we work against. And we create responsible, loving, collaborative, 21st century global citizens.
Very interesting, very interesting. And is this being included now in the curriculum of different schools?
In one country, North Macedonia, it has been put in the national curriculum compulsorily. So every single 5-year-old in the whole country has to learn this Think Equal program. We are in several classrooms in India. We have just started up a partnership with Pratham. We have a partnership with Kaivalya Foundation. We are thus far in 820 now Anganwadis. We are also now about to work with 800 mothers groups. We are working with Learning Curve in Telangana. We are in many, many states already. We're in 20 countries across the world. In some countries, we are in states or provinces to full saturation, like the Eastern Cape of South Africa. We are in every grade R reception classroom in that whole province. Imagine, Ashutosh, what is going to happen in 10 years' time when those 5-year-olds are 15 and they have grown up loving and respecting rather than hating or limiting others. Fantastic. Imagine how the statistics are going to drop, even just on the basis of depression. Our Think Equal children learn how to deal with sadness. They are given the tools. They are given the exercises. They practice them. They become part of their living arsenal of how to deal with. They get sad. That's okay. Sadness is part of life. They are boys. They cry. Yes, of course they cry. None of this man up, don't cry like the girl, which leads our boys to commit suicide at the end of the day, you know?
Very, very interesting. I'm going to keep looking out for all the results that I'm sure you will be publishing, and I'm sure people will
Yes,
be
indeed.
talking about. This is because this is what the world needs. And thank you for doing this. So, Leslie, now let me talk a little bit about your other interest, which is your being a human rights advocate.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about the work you are doing for human rights in the world.
So it is all bound up with Think Equal. At the end of the day, it's a gentler way. I don't go in, fighting warmongers, or basically I build a generation, or I work with others to build a generation of human rights respecters, of human rights advocates, of those who will stand up for the rights of each and every human being to have equal dignity, and respect and love, and be included, and for no one to be left behind, either on the basis of them being differently abled or of a different color, or that is the human rights work, essentially. Only I do it through this particular program. We're building a generation of human rights respecters. It's Amazing. As simple as that. It's the same thing as the Think Equal work.
Amazing. And a question that is often asked of me and by different people is, what is the impact of culture on human rights? Different countries. I beg your pardon?
Yeah, I think that is a really important question, Ashutosh. It's the be all and end all for me. Culture is the culprit. And we have to recognize this. Right. We've become, in many cases, so politically correct. Oh, we must respect their culture. Oh, we must adapt the program for every country we go into. If I were to adapt the Think Equal books for countries I go into, then I would have to pull out. Now women are allowed to drive in Saudi Arabia, but until very recently, they weren't. I would have to pull all those images out because I have to be culturally adaptive. Excuse me, that's not culture. That's discrimination. So at the end of the day, the problem with culture is it doesn't adapt. Culture is about sticking to what has been before, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's based on certain discriminations, even if it is simply the arrogance of saying my culture is superior to your culture. That in itself, is so destructive. And culture, what we call culture, is cultural thinking. Culture should refer to all of the positive differences that we can celebrate from one country to another in terms of our art, our thought leadership. But it doesn't. Culture is socio-cultural thinking is really what it comes down to when we say respecting the culture of others. We mean respecting the unique otherness of others that is not to be touched, that is to be kept somehow in its historic bell jar, and that is very dangerous. And when that is passed on cyclically, generationally, it works against human rights. Let me just give you one concrete example, because I've been speaking for the last 2 minutes in such generalized terms that I challenge anyone to understand what I actually said, including myself. Look, let me give you a very concrete, simple example. In India, quite rightly, because of human rights abuses, the giving and taking of dowry was banned.
Yeah.
Very important, enlightened move by a government to protect its citizens, because dowry deaths were prolific, right? Dowry is a corrupting influence where a husband who's greedy and his mother-in-law who's greedy, I'm not just saying it's the man, right? Can say, right, get rid of this wife. We need a television set. Let's get another wife. Now, that was happening to an alarming extent, and the government stepped in and said, no more of that. You tell me, has culture persisted or not? Is dowry given and taken? 100%. Despite the fact that it was outlawed, it still goes on. And the problem is that you can change a law, but you can't, unless you do what we're doing with Think Equal when you're with your next generation, you can't change mindset. Mm-hmm. Mindset has to be changed if we are to get anywhere in this world. Mm-hmm. If we are to stop the atrocities that we see on a daily basis, and I mean on a micro scale, when you see a 9-year-old child addicted to pornography and seeing the most horrific, demeaning, degrading images that are going to lead that boy to think that that is normal relations between a man and a woman. Mm. Or whether it is an aggressor like Putin walking in to another country and just taking it for his whimsical, selfish, insane reasons, right? Whatever level that is on. Mm. If we don't change the mindset, it's only a matter of time before what is currently being threatened actually happens.
Well said. Well said. Leslee, on that note of the need to change mindset, and I fully agree, I think the world needs to change its mindset because every one of us have our own little baggage that we carry, which we tend to assume is our culture, and therefore we rationalize it, we justify it to ourselves. I think what you're doing in your organization, Think Equal, is really addressing the root cause of the problem at the age of very young children. Yeah. And I do believe that we will start to see some really positive results of all the good work that you are doing. Thank you again and good luck.
Ye mera saubhagya hai.
Thank you. Thank you. बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया. धन्यवाद.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.